Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry's Situations, and today we're here at Nate's Precision in Reno, Nevada, where we're going to nut and bolt my Jeep Wrangler. So this term nut and bolt refers to basically doing vehicle maintenance. We're going to show you things, tips and tricks you can do at home if you've spent the summer like me out on the trail wheeling. So this is my friend Nate Jensen. He owns Nate's Precision, and if you remember the video we did about 37s versus 40s with my old Ford truck, that truck was built here at Nate's Precision. He did the engine swap, he did the suspension, the axle swap, everything, cage in my Ford. And so Nate is a really talented fabricator, but they also do a bunch of fleet service here, and Nate's background is an ASC certified tech. He worked for years at a local dealership, so he's really uniquely prepared to look at an off-road vehicle and find the little things that maybe they're okay and maybe they need to be serviced. He's going to show us some of his knowledge today. It doesn't matter if you're an overlander going down miles of washboard road or a rock crawler climbing over boulders. If you're taking your vehicle off-road, you're subjecting it to additional stresses when compared to something that's just used for daily driving. Now my Jeep, it's used for a little bit of both. Some overlanding, some rock crawling. It's got 37-inch Nitto Trail Grapplers, and they're bigger and heavier than the stock tire, so they subject it to additional stresses. So we're here at Nate's Precision today. We're going to check the drivelines, all the suspension components, the steering components, the fluids, the brakes, the tires and wheels, all of these different components in order to make sure that they're up to snuff and not going to leave us stranded on the trail. So one issue I've noticed on this, Nate, this summer is there's a clunk in the front end.
Okay, well, we're gonna check each joint for play, bolts for loose. Obviously, we've hit some rocks, which is good, means it's being used, but we will see where our play is. Hopefully no cracks or anything, since you are running all the factory control arm mounts.
Right.
So we will see what is loose, or hopefully what's going on. Common areas are track bars on a Jeep. The holes sometimes will get elongated, but you guys have already strengthened that. So we'll just see if it's maybe just a joint or one of these bolts. It still has the misalignment style bolts in it instead of a fixed. So if those get loose, it'll start to move and roll back and forth on the eccentrics. So we'll go through each piece and see what's looser, find our problem.
So you've got a bunch of tools out here, so you don't have to go back and forth to your toolbox. You got about everything you need. So what sort of tools would you need for a job like this if you're doing it at home?
So even at home, your basic bag that should be with you on the trail is going to be your link bolts, nuts, driveline bolts, whether it be a wrench, a socket if you have room. You don't have to have a torque wrench, but if you do, hey, you got the room to carry it, carry it. Otherwise, all your basics, anything that moving parts, sway bar, links, drive shafts, panhard bar, track bar, lug nut sockets, but your basic set of wrenches and sockets should get you through most on-trail or at-home Jeep repairs or maintenance. 8mm socket, checking just torque on these, just hand torque, you know, you don't have to have a torque wrench, but you can say we're getting a quarter turn out of each one of these already. That one's pretty tight. These bottom out because they are a strap. A U-bolt design, you don't want to over torquing. Up here at the top, you have a flange because it does have the 4-to-1 transfer case, so it's a fixed flange. So it's just a standard bolt. Once again, I just pull on them. You know, there is a factory torque spec, but not everybody's going to have that. And really, as long as they're tight, you're okay. For me, I tighten them and then I will paint pen everything when I'm done. So I know it's been tightened, and it's an easier way to keep track of if something's moving, if you're just kind of on the trail and you want to look and see if things have moved.
And that's like a race car trick, right? And it
Yes.
makes it really easy. You can just visually look and see if that bolt's turned, if the line isn't lined up on each
Yes.
the bolt head and the other end. So I've been bringing everything in to Nate to get nut and bolted. And the tracker has a flange with a driveline on it too, right, Nate?
Yes.
And it was very loose.
Very loose. There was a lot of loose hardware on that one, and we got it all tighten back up and ready to hit the trail again.
So Nate's going to buy me a torque wrench for Christmas, I think.
It's very slight, but just to kind of see, you
Oh,
can
yeah.
kind of see that movement right there,
Yeah.
and that's by hand. So the weight of the vehicle and the torque is going to make that a lot worse. So we'll go through, tighten everything, and then clean all this off, jam nut it, paint pen these also as we move forward. This would be your fixed, weld-in bung or tube nut, and you have this. So if you only have one wrench because you only bought one, you go to tighten it, and you watch the joint rotate. Instead of leaving it rotated, try to get in the center of its travel. So a lot of times you can use a large screwdriver or pry bar, jam it behind it, and then tighten the jam nut up against your bung, and then you're centered in the travel so the joint can still move with the suspension travel. If you tighten it all the way to one side, it's actually bound and it won't move as freely. You'll end up with some noise coming from the rear link. Uppers will be the same thing. Tighten all those. Shocks, as we can see, we got rock rash here, but the nut side is still in good shape when I was looking at it. So we'll go through, put a wrench over here and just tighten it. It'll be one of those things as eventually you'll wear through this bolt and you'll have to replace it.
Yeah.
When we get it up in the air, we'll pull the tires and we'll check brakes, check all the caliper bolts. I have seen those come loose and start rocking around or even lose one, and I've had calipers hit wheels due to just vibration and lack of maintenance. So we'll check each one of those with all the wheels off, see if we have anything there that's weird. While you're under here, kind of peek clearance around shocks and stuff, make sure nothing's hitting. Bump stops. This does have the nice JKS bumps. So it has a key or a coilover style nut to keep it adjusted tight. We want to make sure those are tight in here, which isn't on every Jeep, but this one does have it, so we'll look at all of that up in there. Gas tank bolts, due to the skid plate getting beat on, we'll check the bolts up top on the frame and back here where it attaches to the frame. It's not very often that they come loose, but every once in a while I have seen these, probably from just getting hit, come loose, and this one does get used.
It gets hit.
I particularly like to start on one end and then work to the front. When we get to the front, we'll do a similar procedure. Drive shaft, links, track bar, and one of my most favorite positions to check on any vehicle that gets used is our pitman arm nut, because it is very common, like the panhard bar, that nut on the gearbox. The gearbox, it's a lot of load. So I find this pitman arm nut loose most common.
Okay. That's a big bolt. That's definitely a socket I don't carry on the trail. I need to add it to my toolkit.
Yes, because this one will come loose, and what happens typically, the pitman arm starts to rock on the shaft, and we'll sever the shaft on the sector shaft in the box. You're done.
Yeah.
There's no more steering, so at that point you're hoping to phone a friend or send a friend home to get you another steering box. So a quick visual, we have a crack right here, and you'll see it, old paint, rub your finger on it, you'll see it right through it. So that's just, being even an aftermarket bracket that's tied in here, this weld is okay, but where it's tied in here, there's not a lot of support. There's no rear gusset to help it from moving. So you have this weld here and this 1-inch weld to support it until you get out to here. So we'll back cut this and we'll re-weld and probably end up adding a gusset to the back of that to help with the support as it moves around in here. So you're gonna look at each end. So your panhard bar here where it bolts, and here. Any bracketry where this one lifted, it's got a raised bracket. Even if it was in the factory position down here, you're always gonna look at these bolts, because every time you turn, there's load on these bolts, keeping the front axle centered under the vehicle. So they take a lot of side-to-side load. So you're always gonna check these. Pitman arm, as we talked about. Your tie rod or drag link nuts they're castle nutted, they technically should be tight, but we will put a bar on here and we'll squeeze these. We'll also check it when we lower it back down. I like to start the vehicle while it has weight and rock the steering wheel side to side. That, and have somebody watch. You'll see if you have a lot of movement, in and out movement, then you have a tie rod end or drag link end that has play, and at that point you'd start to replace each end by itself that has play. So as you're checking things, grab a friend, jack it up, put 2 jack stands to support the weight of the vehicle. Keep tires 1-2 inches off the ground. You can check ball joints. So with the tire up off the ground a little bit, put a pry bar underneath and jack up and down. If you have a lot of movement in the ball joints, then you're starting to get excessive play. You need to start planning replacing those before they fail. Same thing, lower it back down with the weight of the vehicle, have them rock the steering wheel. If you have play in and out here or here at any of your tie rods or drag link ends, those are starting to get loose, and loose steering components in a Jeep definitely will end up with the death wobble that nobody wants. So it's basic maintenance. They might not fail due to play, but you'll start to get that extra shake that you don't want in the steering wheel. So we'll get this one up, and I'll check for wheel bearing, ball joint play. I'll also start pulling tires, and we'll peek at the brakes, make sure those are in good shape. If all that's in good shape, put the tires back on it, torque the lug nuts. If you weren't taking the tires off to check brakes, torque your lug nuts. Torque your lug nuts between runs, in my opinion, because there is a lot of load. Torque specs on each vehicle will range. Typical Jeep, Toyota, basic trail rigs, 100 foot-pounds. As long as you're between 90 and 110, you're normally pretty good. It's all based off of the size of the wheel stud. If you're running a wheel spacer, I will show you on this vehicle, when we pull the tire, there's a wheel spacer on this. You want to make sure that those are torqued. If the wheel spacers come loose, lug nuts can be torqued, but you'll still lose the whole assembly. So you want to keep an eye on maintenance on both. Our blown out boot. So as you can tell, we got the worn drag link boot. This is mainly used to keep the dirt out and keep grease in. It doesn't say that you have a bad part, and depending on the parts store you go to, you can buy just the boot. If the joint's tight, replace the boot, keeps all the dirt, water from trying to get into that joint. But this will still get you home, but it's a basic maintenance item. While you're under here, you're visually looking hoses, bottom of radiators, make sure they haven't been hit or there's not like a leak that stands out. You just gotta be observant. And you have skid plates, so it's hard to see tranny pan bolts or leaks. So we'll get the flashlight out, we'll peek up in here. If you start to see anything wet, I recommend starting to remove skid plates to get up in there and check. I do like to check the adapter nuts that hold the transfer case to the transmission because of the torque from the transfer case moving. I've had those come loose and actually cause a leak that you don't see until you've lost quite a bit of fluid. So a lot of times, if I can't reach it, I'll pull skid plates to get in there to make sure that it's your once a year maintenance, so you're not broken on the trail. So.
Another thing you want to check is your tires and wheels. So I'm running 37-inch Nitto Trail Grapplers on these AV Pintler wheels. You'll notice I don't have any weights, the clip-on weights on the outside. Those have a tendency to get peeled off. These tires balanced out pretty well. They didn't take a lot of weight, but I used the stick-on weights on the inside of the wheel in order to balance them. They're a lot better protected from the rocks. Another thing you want to check is any sort of gouges, slashes in the tire. I did lose a valve stem earlier this year. I haven't had any issues with the tires themselves, but you want to check for bruising or any sort of punctures. Check all your tire pressure as well.
So on this, if you have somebody to help, it's helpful. You can have somebody stand on the brakes, hold the pressure on it that way. You can use a pry bar and jam it through and put it against the ground if you need to. On this one, I'll have somebody climb inside. We'll stand on the brakes and we'll torque these down. Stock torque on a Jeep is 100 foot-pounds. Typically, these are installed with red Loctite, but just as a general, I like to go around and check and make sure they're still tight. I'll go take the other side off and torque all the same parts on that side. And we'll be able to set the tires back on it and check for any play at our tie rod or drag link ends. Make sure we don't have excessive in and out play. And then if we want, we can take it apart and replace the split boots. Then we can go back through and adjust the preload on the ball joint, take out a little bit of that movement. We'll also check these little nuts in here as we tighten up everything on the front. But at this point, we're finding definitely what could be causing the noises that you're having.
So as you can see, this was a worthwhile trip to Nate's Precision. My Jeep needed a lot of love after a summer on the trail. Does your vehicle need maintenance? You better check and let us know. Comment below and let us know what we forgot or missed and what your vehicle needed.